Welcome to another edition of The Military Historian. As part of the continued leadership series, we're going to be speaking to a retired Brigadier General and find out what his secrets to leadership are. Next on The Military Historian. Stick around. We're going to get into it.
Some areas, but when you find out we are at the time in our society,
they remain. And so when we form our understanding about who we are and what we have to
And we're back. And I have a very special guest, General Vincent Buggs. I actually worked for him, so I'm actually going to enjoy this today because I had a chance to actually work with him under the 79th. So we're going to cover a few topics, including his book, his podcast, and his company, Aspire to Inspire. Tell us about that, sir, and tell us about yourself.
Hey, so how's everybody doing today out here in sunny Tampa, Florida? Chilling, we call it the Black Wolf area down here, which we don't have any, but we just like to call it that. Everything's going great. I appreciate it. Aspire and Inspire is embrace the power of production, which is where we try to get to find inspiring people out in the community or Hollywood or wherever, anybody that's trying to do something positive within our community or within the nation. So I've talked to ambassadors of Africa. I've talked to who was an ambassador of Africa. I've talked to multiple different people, some generals and school teachers. But the thing is, we believe that in our podcast on Embrace the Power is that there's not a lot of positive communication going out there, and it's a lot easier just to go with some negative rhetoric. So we decided to do an uplifting kind of program on our channel. With that being said, Schellenberg, thanks again for having me come on your show. Lloyd, we go way back,
Yeah, we go back a few years, don't we, sir?
Yeah, we do go back.
We were at the 79th when I was a public affairs officer back then, and that's been a while or two. Then you went to the 364th. Let me tell the audience a little bit about your education. So you are a tried and true Southern Georgia graduate, aren't you? Through and through, right?
Yes, I am. Tried and true. Yeah,
and
Georgia
you
Southern all
have
the
a
way.
degree in history and German. And by the way, vielen Dank. Freut mich, Sie kennen zu lernen. I'm glad you're here, sir. I'm very, very glad you're here.
Dankeschön.
Dankeschön. He does speak
Dankeschön.
German. And he also has a master's degree in strategic studies, and that's with the military college, correct?
Right, that's correct. Air War College, and then I have another degree.
Master's degree in global history.
Global history.
So you're the guy that probably should be hosting this show, not me. You have more background in history than I do. But I'm not mad. I'm happy for
you do a great job.
Yeah, well.
Hey, you do a great job.
Yeah, well, something's funny is when we were over the 79th, I had a lot of time to learn under you. And one of the things I want to tell the audience is he is as positive as he actually portrays himself to be. I've never had a bad or unpleasant interaction with General Buggs at any given time. Any given time. No matter how bad his days were, he found ways to mentor, to help people. And, sir, I want to thank you for that.
Oh, you're welcome. You're welcome. I get that a lot, and I kind of put that in my book on my travels. But I think a lot of that comes from my upbringing. You got to think about it. I come from parents. I'm in my 60s, so I come from parents that grew up during segregation, and then my other grandparents my grandparents and great grandparents during slavery and Reconstruction. So you kind of, learn the fallacies that, my grandfather, my grandmother, Big Mama, we used to call her, she used to teach us is that you have to be able to keep a smile on your face, even in the most worst times and the most troubling times, to uplift the people around you. So seeing their resiliency as I was growing up, and I just carried it over into the military with me. But the one thing I realized is that just because I'm having a bad day, I need to make sure that I give everybody around me a better day. And I would say, it'll work itself out.
Everything always does. There's an old Bible passage that I live by that says that this too shall pass. There's never an exception to that rule. Nothing is permanent. Not even the space we live in. It's nothing is permanent.
That is correct.
Now, while I was with you in the 79th, by the way, let me do a shout out in your book. So I'm going to put that up right here. You're going to see it right here. And I'm going to tell you about it. It's called Keep It Rolling From War to Vision. What is the book about?
Well, I took some of the trials and tribulations that I, as a young person, went through growing up. My dad fought in Vietnam. He came back from post-traumatic stress. He brought all that luggage back with him. And as a child in that house, watching him go through that, and after myself going to combat, a couple of different times, I finally understood, kind of the things he was going through and how you have to adjust. And, he just struggled with a lot of things. So in my book, I kind of capture this thing called No Time to Heroes, is when he kind of comes and talks to me before I go to my first tour in Iraq at the beginning of the war in 2004. But I also talk about relationships within the military that people are going to run into. And I do talk about not just, it's easy as an African-American to talk about discrimination, but I just didn't talk about discrimination. I talked that there are genderisms. I talked about the isms, as I said, is that the different things people face. And sometimes, even yourself, you can reflect on this. You can be going through something and everybody around you can tell you that you're crazy or it's not happening, but it is happening, and you're very well aware it's happening. And you find it ironic that you can have 13 people in a room or 10 people in a room and tell you that what's going on isn't transpiring. So what I wrote in my book is, don't ever think that what you see through your own lens is not happening, or your perception. Sometimes your perception is spot on. It's just that the rest of the team has gotten on confirmation bias, or that the rest of the team is on groupthink. And so you can't navigate your issue or the things that you face just because you got a mass amount of people that are on groupthink. And I try to steer away from being a group thinker when I was in the military. And like, as you know, in the 79th with me, I believed in like your vision, public affairs, they needed funding, or I would take money from the SPO budget and give it, support operations budget, and give it to different agencies within the building so they can conduct their business. Because what I felt was everybody came to work with a mission every day. And if you're telling me that funding is the problem, then you got to rob Peter to pay Paul so people can follow their passion. Because no one joins the military to sit at a desk every day. I mean, maybe some people, but the majority of us join to see the world.
I joined to see the world. And frankly, my father wanted me out of the house because I was 16 and had quit school. My father came home with a recruiter and said, he'll sign whatever paperwork you put in front of him. And I'm like, no, I won't. And my dad looked at me and said, where are you going to stay? So that ended that question right there. Now, you said while you were at Southern Georgia Southern, they taught you to value yourself as an asset. What does that mean?
Well, you got to remember, I came in right during I was that generation that was going through integration in the United States, and we moved over to Germany for years to get away from the craziness of Louisiana. But when I was at Georgia Southern, I learned something is that I had a history teacher named Dr. Charles Thomas and an ROTC instructor named she retired as Major General Jessica Wright. That they taught me that you have to kind of be adaptive in your situations, and you cannot be a victim of every circumstance and base it on your color or whatever, but you have to look at the situations, and then you have to be a chameleon to kind of navigate that. And so when I was at Georgia Southern, I literally started learning the things that you should be taught as you grow up as a young man, the things that you should have mentors for, which there was not a lot of them out there. But the mentor thing that I learned was that you have to constantly evolve as a man or as a person. So let me clear that up. As a person, to see the world from multiple lenses, and you just can't have one narrow periscope. You have to have a
That's
kaleidoscope
true.
of how you see things, and then how you evolve through those different situations.
And I tend to believe, and along the same lines here, it's very simple. There are people who will tell you that they have their own truth. I have to believe that there is one truth. One truth. If a man walks up and shoots another man and kills him, and goes to trial and says that I had my reasons for it, therefore it wasn't murder. Well, the law says it's murder, and according to that, it's one truth. If he says that this man did something horrible to my family and it was retribution, well, then that's what he sees as his truth. Bottom line of it is,
That's correct.
it's still murder. It just was done with a particular reason in mind. And from a societal point of view, we are living in a society today, in my opinion, that believes that there are multiple truths for everything, and I tend to believe that that's not the case. And you have to be willing to look at the absolute truth and realize you may or may not be wrong. But if you are wrong, you have to admit it and move on.
Right. So, great question. Great statement of what you just made, and so it comes down to historical knowledge. So the great shows talk about historians. So it comes down to your historical background of knowledge of what you have, and it comes down to Nelson Mandela's constant thing is that you can't exercise your rights unless you understand your rights, and you cannot understand your rights unless you're educated. Right.
Absolutely.
So the thing is. So the thing that we're encompassing today is not the fact that we have dumb people. We have people that are less informed on the things that are pertinent to them. So when you're not informed, you take in your information from different apertures or different perspectives, and at the end of the day, you formulate that your ideas. And so I think the challenges we face today, and you're spot on, is the truth. One person's truth is somebody else's. And that's absolutely right, because you see it play out in the media all the time.
Right.
The thing is that we cannot find common ground. So Thomas Paine wrote Common Sense, and if you go back and read Common Sense, there's some key points in Common Sense he wrote was that you have to take all the emotion out of everything and balancedly look at what is in front of you. And if you can be analytical, then you're able to make a decision. But the thing is, situational awareness, being analytical, critical thinking, we laugh and joke about it now, but now we realize how more important it is that we be critical thinkers. And we have a lack of that to some degree.
I would hate to have to disagree with you on that one. I went to college, and I got a lot of different perspectives, and particularly since we both have served over in the Middle East. And sitting through a college class talking about a perspective on the Middle East from a professor who's never been there is always interesting, only because to a certain extent, they don't know what you're talking about. They don't understand from a cultural perspective. For example, in Iraq, when we were in Iraq, knew that you absolutely never touched or spoke to a woman directly when she was with a man, because she could be going home later on, and culturally, they saw no issue with actually beating that woman for talking to that man. or that soldier. So we literally, at some point, realized respect their culture, and don't speak directly to the woman unless you are given permission to do so. So those are little things that, from a cultural perspective, that we learned over in Iraq. You spent a lot of time there as well, just as I did. And one of the things that I did over there was I was a public affairs officer. So for a certain extent, I was there to tell the truth. I was there to actually explain what was going on. And as I was there, I saw public affairs play a less and less significant role in reporting from a war zone. And in Vietnam, we tried to beat back press. In Korea, we didn't even have it. And when we went to Iraq, we got better at it. But where are we at now with public affairs, and particularly military public affairs officers and public affairs officers and broadcasters? Where are we at with that? And how did you use them? What was the way that you used them, and how did you put them to work?
All right, so I'm going to answer. You have two questions,
and I'm
going to answer both of them because you did. Yeah, two in there. So the first one I wanted to say is that the good thing about being a military brat and going off overseas, there was an AFN commercial back in the 70s they used to run, and they would tell Americans not to wear the wrong clothes off base because it would send the wrong message. And at the end of the commercial, which was critical, is that anytime you're in a foreign country, you are an ambassador of your country. So you should behave as an ambassador. So I took that to Iraq when I went overseas to Iraq. Now, the second fold to that your question or your statement was public affairs. So good thing about growing up right at the end of World War II, seeing all the World War II footage in the 70s or late 60s, 70s, watching those old reels. The one thing you learned is they tell a story, right? And so I'm in the Library of Congress, the library.
Edward R. Morrow.
Say that. Yes, because I ended up doing one of those interviews, sitting down talking to one of the directors about my experience in the military. So understanding where public affairs is, and this is critical. And anybody listening to this that's in the military, your public affairs is instrumental in telling the story in your unit and having them get out to the younger soldiers and getting their story. My struggles, what I see today, are a lot of young people don't get out and their stories not being told, right? And the commands aren't telling their stories at the lower level. So public affairs is a big piece of giving the positive narrative of the military, and and not the spin, but the positive narrative. So here's the thing, and I'll touch on this, Lloyd, multiple times.
Yep.
There are 99 good things that happen in a unit every day or during the week, yet we only see the 1% or 2% of bad things from the press. Not public affairs, but from the press. Oh. And I don't think commanders realize how important it is to go through public affairs class and learn how to speak in front of a mic. So I've had so many commanders when I was a GO telling me, I'm not getting in front of the camera. I didn't have a problem. My thing was, hey, look, you're going to give me an opportunity to tell my story or tell the story of my unit. I'm going to make sure the narrative fits the, what they're doing. So I looked at it as a positive when Facebook came out, and there you guys started using Facebook as an instrument of putting out, projecting that information management. I also looked at how you guys went on social media, public affairs, and when you were at the 79th, how you guys looked at stories and started shaping stories of what was happening in the command. You had the magazine. All that is historical documentation that matters down the line. But I think today, commanders aren't well versed in it. They're kind of told that public affairs or the press is bad business, and it's not.
No, it's not.
Now pause there.
Even some general officers, when I was over in Iraq, I have to tell you that General Casey was not wild about me. He had a colonel whose whole job was to get in the middle of everything I did, and I was attached to the State Department, telling their story and telling the United States Army story. He would send a colonel out to do everything he could to stop me from getting anything done that I could get done. Finally, we put me in civilian clothing And I ended up spending one of my whole tours in civilian clothing working for the State Department as a military journalist. But I did see, and I don't know, did you see this when you were a commanding general, CO? Did you see that a lot of civilian agencies are now starting to creep in and start to do the work that AFN and AFN broadcast journalists used to do?
All right. Well, but there's a reason behind it because information is so fast today and things are happening at warp speed. You
Yes.
got to get ahead of it. So you can't AI this, okay? That you really have to get after it and have somebody, we call it boots on the ground, directly looking at. Look how important the press agent is at the White House, regardless of which president it is, the press agent there.
Yes.
And all those journalists there. But there's also military journalists around there because there's people at the White House or at Congress that are military that are doing functions there every day, and their stories don't go untold. So I love the fact that you are PAO, public affairs, and that you were out telling stories. But because I just want you to think yourself, and I hate to, this is your podcast, but look how many people had great stories that never went untold when you guys would go in with the slate into some of the generals and say, hey, these are the stories we want to cover. We got these exercises. These are the things. And look how many things were taken off your media sheet that should have been on the media sheet. You know what I'm saying?
Absolutely. And the funny part is some of those things actually were prophetic in many ways. I got to interview Barack Obama. I got to interview President Joseph Biden. I got to interview pretty much almost everybody in Congress and the Senate at one time or another, and presidents. And one of the greatest privileges I had as a public affairs officer was interviewing Condoleezza Rice. One of the most, I set up the interview and wrote some of the questions. And I remember she's one of the most brilliant people I've ever met in my life, bar none. It takes us hours to write these questions. She takes minutes to rewrite them and said, this is where you should be. I don't know how you do that. I don't know how you do that. She did it without any question. You have become to work the press pretty well yourself after all these years as a brigadier general, right?
Oh, just a little bit. I work with them. I don't run from them. That's the question. I don't run from them. I work with them. I try to work with them.
Well, you did.
Yeah, because next week I'll be on another show. So yeah.
Yeah. Well, the 79th, you did a story about Good Morning America. Tell us about that story and how, your time spent on the press while with the 79th. I find that story kind of funny, actually.
Yeah, so the name of this, well, it's evolved to how the general met the gingerbread man. But in the early 2007, I went back to Iraq, and some kids wrote me. A lady named Miss Sandra Mosley out from Georgia Southern Staff wrote me and said, "Look, I have this kid. They're having to write a story about the gingerbread man, and would you write about the gingerbread man while you're in Iraq?" So I said, "Sure, I'll do it." But the thing is, after I got all the information and we found a little gingerbread man to put in the story. I looked at one of my teammates, and at the time I was a coalition officer over there, and I had a master sergeant named Jesse from the Air Force working with me. I said, should I just write one story, Jesse? Why don't we tell a tale? And he goes, what do you mean? I go, look at all these missions I have to go on. So let's take the gingerbread man on missions. So we started doing that and evolving. So I would write the kids on a regular basis, like pen pals, and tell the story about what I was doing with the gingerbread man. I'd send videos and just a bunch of different content. And it got to the point it blew up, for that one group of kindergartner kids at David Emanuel Elementary School that I was pen pals with. So years later, I went back to Georgia Southern when I had made general to go, do the pin everybody, do the football thing on the field and give the speech for ROTC and then commission a bunch of people that are in Georgia on that field. And as I was there, I told my aide, I said, look, you know why I'm here? I need to swing up to David Emanuel and just tell those kids thank you for everything they did for me while I was a major at the time. So we drove up. I drove up. He stayed down where he was at, but I drove up and went to David Emanuel, met the principal, met the students. And then I went in and we all talked, and at that point, the kids were just blown away that I took the time, and they were seniors now, at the time to stop in and just say thank you for their service. Thank you for being meaningful kids to take the time to write a soldier. And I tell them, during deployments, we have good times and we have bad times, man. And those bad times, you always need something to uplift you. And it was really ironic is one day we had just had a bad attack on the base. I was coming back and I was just thinking about everything I saw down there where people lost life or everything. It was really a hard day. And there was a letter from the kids a box on my desk from the
Care
kids.
package,
And
right?
I opened it up, man. And a care package from them. And it had Georgia Southern stuff in it and just all kind of stuff. And at that point, man, that made my day. So it was like God's like, oh, here you go. I know you're having a rough day here at the palace. So here you go.
Well,
So I took that in and I take it to light and I had to thank them. And so ironically, somebody passed the story to Good Morning America, CBS, Fox. And next thing I was on interviews for like 6-7 months, man. Wall Street Journal and the Wall Street. I was interviewing like every other month. I was interviewing with like 4 or 5 reporters.
and it started to irritate the generals a little bit, didn't it? Yeah. And that's the fun part. You know what? I will say this. You still keep in contact with Georgia Southern, and you actually embody the principle of giving back. Tell us about that and why that's so important.
The thing is, no matter what institution, even the Army, I attend Heroes for Honor to support Army events. We go clay pigeon shooting. I try to support as much as I can. But Georgia Southern was a turning point in my life. So, every person goes through some point or in their life where there's a turning point. And so when I was at Georgia Southern, I finally ran into some people that actually cared about Vince Buggs as a human being and where Vince Buggs go. There was a lady named Helen Yates and her husband, Judge Yates, they kind of took me in. But every time I turned around, Georgia Southern was always doing something positive. When my first tour in Iraq, they did so much for my unit. I was overwhelmed. There was very little I could do. They made T-shirts. They just did a lot my first tour in Al-Assad. And so after that, I never forgot them. And then last year that ironically we're talking about this, I was the commencement speaker for graduation.
Wow.
And it was pretty cool because of my daughter. Yeah, so my daughter had friends that were ahead of her and they were graduating. And they text her because she was at another school. They text her and they said, look, you won't believe this, but your dad is our commencement speaker and he's killing it. And so I'm so hey, when you get a thumbs up from your daughters, you get a thumb up from your daughter that you're doing a great job. That works. And now she's a Georgia Southern Eagle. She came with me and said, hey, Dad, I want to done playing soccer. If they don't, if I make Georgia soccer team, I don't. If I don't, but I want to graduate from Georgia Southern. I want to be an Eagle. So it was hard for me to tell her no. So now she's attending Georgia Southern. She should be graduating next year. And, so Lloyd, it's been a full circle in life, man, between the military, being at the 79th, the 364th, meeting people like you, your team that you work with, that because you guys are people. You guys impact lives every day. You tell somebody's story, and dude, I don't think you can take that too lightly. You know what I mean?
No, people's stories are their legacy, and their legacy is exactly what they've worked their entire lives to achieve. And if you downplay that or minimize that, you really are minimizing their whole life, their whole view on the world and what they've done. So you're right, telling the story, telling it accurately, telling it truthfully. And by the way, I'm a big believer in a journalist's opinion is not that important. I've always believed that. The story is what this is about. But sometimes they intersect. Right now I'm working on a book called Letters from Baghdad, Left Behind, about a family I interviewed whose husband was murdered. He was an informant. Well, I've kept in touch with the family, and I'm telling their story about what it took to get them out of Iraq before they were killed, because there was a price on their head, what the United States military and the United States government did to save them. So the stories intersected with the journalist, because I was also the last one to escort them out. And oddly enough, that particular day, I didn't end up being a journalist. I ended up being a gunner because we had a suicide bomber try to kill them. So I ended up being a gunner that day rather than a journalist.
Oh, Right.
It is what it is. The stories intersected with the journalism. Sometimes that happens. But most of the time, I truly believe the journalist needs to stay out of the story. That is not about him, it's about the story.
Well, right after I retired, I taught history, high school history, and a little bit of history at the University at Georgia Southern. But the key thing I told all the students there is that as they sat in my classroom, I taught for like 4 years, and I told each and every one of them that every day they wake up, they're building their legacy, right? And you're telling us your story in life. And the thing is, you don't see what your story is going to be because you think you have to be famous. I said, you can't be famous because you got to live life. But each day, you should be documenting your journey because eventually, if you have grandkids or you have nieces and nephews, they're going to want to know more about you because ironically, what I see today, which breaks my heart after I was talking to my students, is multiple kids have no connection to the past of their past and their family. They know their immediate family and they know a few cousins and aunts, whatever, or uncles.
Yep.
So we've done a terrible job from a story standpoint of families being able to tell the story because your story is your legacy and the family name matters. And so I've pushed that narrative for years, and I'm going to continue to push that narrative. And I hope Combat Camera, PAO, regardless if AI comes in, the human aspect cannot be AI. So,
No.
I'm just going to say this again. The human aspect of the human story cannot be AI.
100% agree. I tell you, I watch what's happening, and I work at Warner Brothers, and I see Hollywood, and I see what they're doing in AI, and I'm a writer too. And like you, keep it rolling. I have books that are out and stuff that I do. Here's the thing. AI can't write as well as I can, no matter what, because AI wasn't there in Iraq. They didn't do what I did.
Right.
So nothing that AI will ever do will ever compete with what I do as a writer. So what I try to do is I try to remember that it's not personal. As a writer in Hollywood, I've got scripts out, I've got things out, I've got TV series, other things that need to be written or rewritten or whatever the case may be, and I do write that stuff. AI can't do what I do because they can't understand exactly the nuances of what happened. You, as a brigadier general, understand the nuances of leadership. One of the things that I noticed about you while I was there, and I saw you multiple times do this, take time to mentor people. Why do you mentor people, and why is mentorship so important? Because I see that and aspire to inspire. That is your whole job.
I mean, I looked at it as that somebody took the time to break the game down to me, as we say. When I got in the military, my first assignment, no one helped me. And so my first assignment, and I kind of put it in my book that, I almost got out of the military after as a lieutenant because my first unit was eating its young. And so the next unit I got into, I actually ran into a person that actually started mentoring me. And then I catapulted to another unit, and there's this guy named, and I will say his name to this day. His name was D.V. Childs, Captain D.V. Childs.
Okay.
I thought he was the biggest country boy I'd ever met. Yeah. But D.V. Childs literally slowed me down, taught me everything it was about why the Army was important, taught me about, looking at the history of the Army, why things and infantry and supply matter. And after being with DV for like 2 years, and he was the one that kind of made me go on full active duty, he changed my life because he explained to me that sometimes you have to look at things from different lenses, and it's important that you take the same time. And you've heard this before, you got to pay it forward to the next generation. But my pay it forward, and a lot of people had a problem with this, was I pay it forward to everyone. So remember, I would come in the 79th or the 364th, all the people are in cubes, they're on their islands, right?
Yep.
So I would come in and be that hurricane or that tsunami from the island.
Well,
I would come in and go talk to everybody and say, how are you doing this morning? How's everything going? They used to call me the mayor when I was at USARC. They used to call me the mayor of USARC because I would go through the whole building and just ask people how they're doing, check on them.
Well, that fits you perfectly. Like I said, you're such a personable individual, and I was very proud to serve with you at the 79th. And I am actually enjoying this conversation. One of the things I'm enjoying about you is, in case the audience, I'm sure they've noticed, this positive attitude about him isn't fake. It's real. This is who he is. And he has done this throughout his entire career. And he has been a great leader. There's a reason he made Brigadier General. I told you before you made Brigadier General, you were in, before you even knew it, that you were going to make it. Did I not say that?
You did. You and
I
a few
kept
others.
telling you
I kept saying, hey, oh, there's a funny story behind it too, because you know my disbelief. So I was at UCOM, AFRICOM, I was CENTCOM's LNO. So I was down in the vault, whatever they call it. And so the phone's ringing off the hook, and some guy comes in. He goes, "Hey man, all these generals are looking for you. They're trying to call you." I said, "What, am I in trouble? What's going on? What did I mess up?" And they're like, "No, man, we don't know, but we were told that you need to report to the 2-star Marine general and call this General Lucky." And I said, "Look, dude, I'm working for the CENTCOM commander." I said, "What do I got to do with these two guys?"
Yeah.
So I go up, and then the general, the 2-star general, the Marine general goes, "Hey, I got to move you. You know, you made flag." I'm like, "What are you talking about?" He goes, "You made general." I'm like, "Oh, I did?" He goes, "You don't know?" He goes, I said, "No." He goes, "You know, most people check." I'm like, "Well, I never check because I didn't expect to make it."
I told you were going to make it. I swore up and down. I think I told you about every drill. You're going to make general. The reason I said that is because who you are, your level of intelligence, your personality, just everything about you indicated leader. And you really are a true leader. And you've taken this outside
Appreciate that.
military. What do you do at Inspire for people? What exactly does your company do?
All right, so we're under Inspire to Inspire is kind of our mantra for Embrace the Power. And what we try to do is we work with people to find their center, and companies and organizations. So I do a lot of public speaking at companies and organizations. And then, you know, I run a podcast bringing people on to talk about the positive experiences they have, how they're impacting the community. But I think the biggest thing that I want to do with the company is that we're designing a thing called the Holistic Soldier, which is going to come out hopefully in a few years, which is to try to help soldiers who are still out there struggling, because there is a lot. But to do that, I need to be in the community to show them that we're giving back from a standpoint. Because every soldier, and I said this on an interview, every soldier that's been deployed should come back and say thank you to the general public for their support, because the Vietnam vets did not get that support, right? And so I am very adamant that Embrace the Power, that we give back to the community to show them that we were thankful for their support during the Iraq, Afghanistan conflicts and wars, and to make sure that the situation that happened in Vietnam never, ever, ever happens again in America.
Boy, I'll tell you right there, that is a big, big statement, and I agree with it. Now, where can people get a hold of your company and your phone number? Go ahead and spell it out, because I'm on iHeart Audio, so they're going to have to listen to you. Where can they get a hold of your company, your website, and your podcast?
Got you. So, hey, first and foremost, guys, go to embracethepower.org. That's my website. It has everything on there if you need to get in contact with me. Also, my phone number is 813-409-4323. Don't spam me, 813-409-4323. Definitely get a copy of my new book, Keep It Rolling. And so don't worry about the covers. We've been evolving the cover, and there's a reason behind it. And I kind of put it out on Facebook, is that I'm never settled with one thing until I'm happy to see something. But I always build planes in flight. And Lloyd can tell you that. He knows I will continuously build a plane in flight until I get it to where I need to be. And lastly, you can always reach out to me at vince@embracethepower.org, because I'm here to inspire and help people find their center but also help organizations look at themselves internally to not be a consultant, because that's a horrible thing. What I like to do is see what products you're making, what are you things you're doing, and how your middle management is managing the people, and try to mentor them to be better leaders, because the mentorship program in America, I hate to say, is struggling, and we need good leadership and things like that to help people get, to enjoy life. We should not be miserable as so many people are in America. And I'll pause right there, Lloyd.
Well, I like that. You know what? I have spent roughly 40 minutes with an old friend of mine who I haven't seen probably, in 15 years now? 10?
15 years, yeah.
Yeah, well,
About
it just
15,
reminds me,
yeah.
I got gray and I got old. But 10, 15 years, and I've spent some time talking to Brigadier General Vincent Buggs, the author of Keep It Rolling and the podcast Aspire to Inspire. And this fits him perfectly well. I want to thank you for giving me your time today. And I want everyone to go ahead and give this man a call and blow up his phones and blow up his company, because he wants the work, I guarantee you, and he loves doing it. You can tell that he loves doing it. General Buggs, thank you so much for being on here today.
Hey, thank you. Hey, guys, and remember the fallen. It's a Memorial Day weekend while we're here. And remember the fallen, because you know what? Without sacrifice, there is no freedom.
There is no freedom. And people, some gave all and all gave some. But, you got to respect the people who gave it all. Thank God for that. You've been listening to the Military Historian Channel. And if you like what you see, you know where to go. Here's what I want you to do. Give this man a call and thank him for his time. I certainly thank him for it. And I have 2 words to say. Peace out. You've been listening to the Military Historian Channel. If you like what you see, hit the like and share button. And email me at themilitaryhistorianpod@gmail.com. We have more episodes coming up, and you can also let me know what you would like to see. Now, all I ask in the comments section is that you be respectful, and I'll try to answer as many as I can. Thank you, and catch you on the next episode of The Military Historian.